Welcome to Mr. Horror. Today we'll be diving into 3 true and disturbing police horror stories. Are you ready to be scared? Let's get started. Officer Sarah had been with the police department for just over a year when she was assigned to work the night shift. Her partner, Officer Tom, was a seasoned veteran who had been with the force for over 2 decades. They patrolled the streets of the city, responding to calls and looking out for any suspicious activity. One night, they received a call from a woman who reported hearing strange noises coming from her neighbor's house. When they arrived, they found the front door ajar and no one answering their calls. As they cautiously entered the house, they were hit with a foul odor that made Officer Sarah gag. A sight that greeted them made her stomach churn. In the living room, they found the decomposing body of the homeowner. It was clear that the man had been dead for weeks and his body was in a state of advanced decay. Officer Sarah struggled to maintain her composure as they searched the rest of the house, finding evidence of something far more disturbing. The investigation into the homeowner's death led Officer Sarah and Officer Tom down a dark and twisted path. They discovered that the man had been a prolific serial killer who had been preying on young women for years. The evidence they found in the house indicated that he had kept his victims captive in a secret room in the basement where he would torture them before eventually killing them. Officer Sarah couldn't believe that such a monster had been living in their community, seemingly undetected for so long. The more they uncovered, the more she felt a sense of dread and disgust at the depths of human depravity. The case of the serial killer shook Officer Sarah to her core. It was a constant reminder of the darkness that existed in the world and the danger that she faced every day as a police officer. However, nothing could have prepared her for what came next. Several months after the serial killer's arrest, Officer Sarah received a package in the mail. Inside was a note written in a scrawled, barely legible hand. It read, "You should have left well enough alone." The package also contained a photograph of Officer Sarah's house, taken from the street outside. She immediately went into panic mode, fearing for her safety and that of her family. It was clear that the monster they had put away had followers who were still out there and who were just as twisted and dangerous as he was. Officer Sarah knew that she had to remain vigilant, both on and off duty. The experience had left her shaken, but it had also made her more determined than ever to protect her community and bring justice to those who had been wronged. I had only been a police officer for a few months when I got assigned to the night shift. My first night on the job, I was partnered up with a seasoned officer named Jim. We were driving around the city, patrolling the streets when we received a call about a disturbance at an abandoned building. As we arrived at the scene, we noticed that the building was surrounded by a tall fence, and the only way in was through a small opening. We cautiously entered the building, and as we made our way through the dark and dusty rooms, we heard footsteps coming from the floor above. Jim and I drew our weapons and slowly crept up the stairs. When we reached the top, we saw a figure standing in the shadows. We shouted for them to put their hands up, but they didn't move. As we got closer, we realized it was a mannequin dressed in a police uniform. But as we turned around to leave, we heard a sinister laugh coming from behind us. We quickly turned around, but there was no one there. It was as if we were being stalked by a silent predator. One Halloween night, my partner and I were dispatched to investigate a call about strange noises coming from a house in a quiet neighborhood. As we arrived at the house, we saw that all the lights were off and there was no sign of anyone inside. We cautiously entered the house, and as we made our way through the rooms, we heard creaking floorboards and doors slamming shut. We followed the noises to the basement, where we found an old Ouija board on a table. As we examined the board, the planchette suddenly moved on its own, spelling out a message that read, "Get out." We quickly left the house, but as we drove away, we saw the silhouette of a figure in the upstairs window. One night, my partner and I were called to investigate a disturbance at an abandoned hospital. As we arrived at the scene, we saw that the hospital was dark and quiet, and there was no sign of anyone around. We entered the hospital, and as we made our way through the empty halls, we heard faint whispers and footsteps coming from the rooms. As we approached one of the rooms, we heard a loud crash, and when we looked inside, we saw a figure in a hospital gown standing over a broken window. We shouted for the figure to stop, but they didn't listen. They jumped out of the window, and when we looked down, there was no sign of them. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. We searched the entire hospital, but we never found any trace of the person. It was a mystery that still haunts me to this day. Officer Karen had been on the force for over a decade, and she thought she had seen it all. But when she responded to a call at a quiet suburban home, she knew right away that this was different. The house was a mess, with overturned furniture and broken glass littering the floor. But what really sent shivers down her spine was the blood. It was everywhere, splattered on the walls and pooled on the floor. And in the middle of the chaos was a young woman, barely conscious and covered in cuts and bruises. As Karen called for backup, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The woman's injuries didn't match up with the mess in the house, and there was no sign of anyone else. But when Karen started to ask the woman questions, she knew she had stumbled onto something truly disturbing. The woman's story was like something out of a horror movie. She had been lured to the house by a man she met online, who promised her a night of fun and excitement. But when she arrived, he was different than she expected. He was aggressive and violent, and she quickly realized she was in danger. She tried to leave, but he locked the doors and windows, trapping her inside. What followed was a nightmare of torture and abuse, with the man gleefully inflicting pain on his victim. And when Karen searched the house, she found evidence that suggested she wasn't the only one. There were restraints and torture devices hidden in a secret room, along with photos and videos of other victims. Karen knew she had to catch this monster before he hurt anyone else. It wasn't easy, but Karen and her team were able to track down the man responsible for the horror at the suburban house. He was a loner, living off the grid in a secluded cabin in the woods. When they raided the cabin, they found a sickening amount of evidence linking him to multiple other crimes, including kidnapping and murder. But what disturbed Karen the most was the man's attitude. He showed no remorse, no empathy for the pain he had caused. He seemed to enjoy it, reveling in the power he had over his victims. Karen couldn't shake the feeling that there were more people out there like him, hiding in the shadows and waiting to strike. As Karen drove home after a long day on the job, she couldn't help but think about the evil that lurked in the world. She had seen things that would haunt her for the rest of her life, but she knew that her job was important. She was a protector, a defender of the innocent, and she would do whatever it takes to keep them safe. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these true and disturbing police horror stories, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel for more creepy content, and hit the notification bell to never miss an upload. Stay safe out there.